Hello, everyone. We'll get started shortly. Just going to give folks a few minutes to join us here. So we'll probably begin in 2 minutes. Thank you for being here. Welcome, 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 everyone. We'll get started shortly. Hello, almost ready to begin. Hi, everyone. Hello and welcome. We'll get started shortly. Great. Let's get started. Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome. We are here today to speak to you about openly licensing scientific research. My name is Taylor Campbell, and I am with Creative Commons. And we're very excited to be co-hosting today's webinar with the OGSL. And so I would like to pass it to Marianta to introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you, Taylor. Hello, everyone. My name is Marie-Anta Diop, and I am the Communication Officer at the Observatoire du Saint-Laurent, or OGSL. For your information, in English, our name is the Saint-Laurent Global Observatory, or SFGO. I will be using the English name throughout the webinar, but if we accidentally switch back to OGSL at some point, just know that OGSL and SLGO are the same organization. So thank you.
Great. And we're also joined here by Monica Granados from Creative Commons. Monica, did you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Monica Granados. I'm based in Ottawa and I'm the Director of Open Science. Thanks for joining us today. We're hopefully going to give you a really good overview of the licenses, how they interact or don't interact with AI, and we'll have time to answer a lot of questions as well at the end.
And lastly, Kat from Creative Commons.
Hi, lovely to be here. I'm Kat Walsh from Creative Commons. I'm based just north of San Francisco, California, and I'm the Copyright and Licensing Counsel at Creative Commons, so hopefully I can answer some of the legal aspects.
Great. And just as a reminder for today's webinar, We are recording this webinar, and we plan to publish the recording and the slides after the fact. Both the recording and the slides will be licensed CC BY, and so you will have access to them via our Zenodo community, which is under Creative Commons. We'll also share via email, and we look forward to continuing the discussion even beyond today's webinar. If you have any questions at any point, please drop them in the chat. But we would like to begin by asking everyone to please introduce yourselves in the chat, so we know who's in the room, and any particular questions or things that you hope to gain from today's webinar. Please add those in your introduction, just so that we can get an idea of how we might be most helpful within the hour that we have together today. For those of you that just joined, welcome. We are inviting everyone, if you would like, to introduce yourself in the chat, and to also use the same chat feature to answer any questions that you may have throughout the presentation. We will be together for 1 hour, and we have a good amount of time scheduled at the end of the hour to have an open discussion about your questions. So please feel free to drop those in throughout the duration of the meeting today. All right, well, let's get started. I'm going to pass it back to you, Marianta, to talk to us about your organization.
Yes, thank you, Taylor. So hello and thanks again, everyone, for joining us today. We are very happy to see such a great turnout for this webinar. We know that some members of our research community and network are participating, and we are also very glad to introduce ourselves to a broader audience. So over the next 10 minutes, I'll give you a brief overview of LCGO, who we are, the network we're part of, some of our key projects and tools, as well as how we use AI to support our work, and why this raised relevant questions about open licenses. So LCGO is a nonprofit organization that was created in 2005. Our mission is to provide open, high-quality data on the Saint-Laurent ecosystem from the Great Lakes to the Gulf. LCGO is also an open access web platform that gives everyone, from academics to policymakers to the general public, access to the knowledge they need to better understand the Saint-Laurent ecosystem. We do this through a number of services. So, for example, long-term data management and archiving, custom and share data visualization tools, training and continuous support for our partner, and also automated solution for managing large volume of data. We are a team of 17 people with a wide range of background, from oceanography to data science to project coordination to communication. So that means that we are well equipped to offer full support throughout the projects we are in. And of course, beyond our internal team, we also work closely with some partners. So we work closely with nearly 60 partners across the marine data ecosystem, and that includes researcher, environmental organization, and also government agency. So we can go to the next slide. So most of our partnership and project are based in Quebec, but LCGO is also part of a national initiative called the Canadian Integrated Ocean Observing System, so the CIOS. The CIOS is Canada's network for integrated ocean science and observation. Its mission is to engage locally, connect regionally, and coordinate nationally, helping to bring Canada's ocean monitoring efforts to a global level. SciUse fosters collaboration and delivers solutions to improve our understanding of the ocean. So thanks to SciUse, users can discover, access, and visualize high-quality ocean data through a centralized online platform. So as you can see, SciUse mission is pretty similar to the LCGO's one, but on a national level. So also LCGO is one of the three regional associations that make up SciUse, the other two being the Pacific and Atlantic region, and we are responsible for managing data related to the Saint-Laurent. So now we can go to the next slide and explore the art of the LCGO's work. So at LCGO, data management is the art of our work, but to manage data effectively, especially in the volumes we're seeing today, innovation is really essential. It is essential because the number of data portals is increasing, which means more competition for funding, and also because data volumes are growing rapidly, which puts more pressure on our team. So to manage all that data and all that portals, we need to be smart and we need to be efficient. So that's why we focus on reducing the time it takes to integrate new data set, on increasing the added value we offer our partner, and on promoting the FAIR principle. So for those who don't know, the FAIR principle help ensure that data is always findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. We can go to the next slide just to have the FAIR principle. Thank you. Those FAIR principles are critical when we want to make sure that data can serve as a public good. So that being said, how do we do this? So we can go to the next slide. So to help us manage the growing amount of data we receive, we've started relying more on automation and AI-assisted processes. So this graphic here shows the different stage of the data workflow where automation and AI can play a role. So in the past, which would be the left column, we would receive a data set and then we would have to manually transfer them, run a quality check, standardize the information to meet FAIR principle and international data management norm. But as I'm sure you can imagine, when you're working with files that can contain hundreds of variables, this takes a lot of time. So now we have automation and AI, like shown on the rest of the graph. We are now able to speed up some of those tasks. So for example, we can now automatically standardize things like time format, dates, label. We can also accelerating quality control. So we always keep a human in the loop, but we confidently rely on automation and AI to handle more time-consuming and repetitive tasks. So that allows us to focus more of our energy on making data accessible through tools and applications that support visualization and knowledge sharing. So now I'm going to show you some of the visualization tools. So once the data has been processed and validated, LCGO integrates it into visualization tools. So some of these tools include the LCGO and SciUse catalog. These are our catalogs where you can find data set on ocean variable like fish presence, invertebrate, and biogeochemistry data and more. You can search by keyword or by ocean variable, and then you can access all the data currently available on those catalogs. So that would be an example of data sets on, I think that was fish presence. So just to give you an idea of how that looks. We also have applications that are useful for the marine sector. So we have marine condition, which lets you explore and access physical and chemical ocean data. We also have navigation. This is the screenshot of the navigation application. So this is a real-time data tool for navigating the Saint-Laurent River and Gulf with data on currents and tides. So this is really helpful for the marine sector. And by the way, a brand new app combining the navigation and the marine condition apps will be launched in winter 2025. It will bring all the essential data for navigating the St. Lawrence into one convenient, user-friendly platform with many customization options. So we are sure that will be more helpful for the users. And we also work closely with partners like the WWF and the Marine Mammal Observation Network to develop citizen science platforms such as eCaplan and Vigimarine. So this screenshot is Vigimarine, is the Vigimarine application. So those are applications that allows people to report sighting of species. So for Vigimarine, that would be species like whales, dolphin, or seals. And then people can visualize that data almost in real time. So those platforms are really powerful tools for researchers, but also for anyone who's curious about the biodiversity of the St. Lawrence. So as you can see, the goal of these tools is to make data accessible and actionable, whether you're a scientist, a policymaker, part of the maritime industry, or even for organizations like the National Coast Guard. Yeah. So to conclude, everything we do at the LCGO revolves around open data, managing it, sharing it, making it more accessible. So that's why having a strong foundation and a clear understanding of how to work with it is so important to our mission. But it's not just about us, it's not just for us, because part of our job is to support our partners and to communicate clearly about things like data licensing, openness, and emerging fields. A great example of that is our collaboration with SciUS on the Building Bridges project. This is an initiative designed to give every region of the SciUS network the tools and knowledge they need to start integrated AI into their workflow. But that's where things can get tricky, because with technology like AI, questions around openness and licensing can become more complex. And that's exactly why we've partnered with Creative Commons, because we wanted to deepen our expertise and stay ahead of the curve so we can guide our partners through this evolving conversation with confidence. So that's why we're here. And with that in mind, I'm going to pass it over to Taylor, who will take us further into the topic.
Thank you so much, Marianta. Yes, we're excited to be working with the OGSL and this research community to support you all. We are an international nonprofit organization. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Creative Commons, we were founded in 2001, and we're dedicated to building a world where education, culture, and science are equitably shared as a means to benefit humanity. As Marianta mentioned, it's important that we work with institutions that are working towards this goal and supporting in these ways. And our work has really brought us into the world of open licensing for scientific research. And that includes research that are data sets, openly licensing data sets, openly licensing uh, your written publications, your preprints. As you openly license your research, it increases the impact of that research. And because you have the ability to remain the copyright holder and can choose your preferred license in most cases, that's a specific area of expertise for Creative Commons. And so it's important that we can continue to understand and have conversations about the role of open licensing for scientific research. So as we talk, I'm going to pass it to Monica, but as we talk, we do have information about open licensing for research as it pertains to data, as well as publications and preprints. So if any of those types of research apply to you, we're here to answer your questions today. So I'll pass it to Monica to talk us through well, sorry, I'm going to read through some of the questions that we know are frequently asked questions that have come from the community. Many of you submitted questions upon registration as well, so we'll be able to address those either in this middle section or at the end during the discussion. But we are very available to make sure that you feel comfortable navigating these topics. So the first question that we hear the most is, can I train an AI model on CC licensed data and or research? If I publish my research with an open license, do I still retain copyright? Why should I license my research with CC BY, which is one of our licenses? We'll get into the licenses shortly. And then lastly, how does open licensing affect whether my research can be used to train generative AI? So we'll be addressing these questions and more throughout the next portion of the webinar. Um, and I'll pass it to you, Monica, to walk us through some of the work that Creative Commons is doing and our licenses.
Great, thanks, Taylor. The licenses are really, put simply, a way for you as the copyright holder to decide how others can use and share and reuse your work. That is then baked in to the licenses. We have a spectrum of licenses to give you that flexibility to give users downstream an ability to use your copyrighted work. So to just do an overview of what they are, we have 6 different licenses with 4 different conditions. So the least, it goes going from least permissive to most restrictive, or most freedom to least freedom. We start with the CC BY license. So that's at the top on the right-hand side of your screen. What that requires is if you have a copyrighted work, you put a CC BY license on it. It means that the users who use your work have to give credit to you, the creator. That's our most, that's the one with the most freedom, least restrictive. Sort of going down the spectrum, we have also a share alike condition. So what that does is basically require others downstream to use the same license that you've applied. So if you have a CC BY SA, for example, you have to, others who use your work have to apply that same license. We also have a non-commercial condition that you can add. That, of course, does make it more restrictive, meaning that users downstream cannot use your creation for commercial purposes. So if you could have a CC BY NC-SA license, for example, it means that others can use your work for non-commercial purposes, have to give you attribution, and have to use the same license downstream. Our most restrictive license would add the no derivatives condition. So that means that others could use your work, but could not make any changes to the work. So you really have to be presented as is. And then you could do a sort of a combination of the conditions where the most restrictive license, would be a CC BY NC ND, meaning no commercial uses and no derivatives, and you have to do an attribution. So now that you know the spectrum of options, I'm here to convince you that as a room full of researchers, why you should use a CC BY license. We have created this resource, that to argue to you that you should use the CC BY license. It's available in English and in French and in other multiple languages. And this resource is complemented by other resources as we've created on why do you use the CC BY license on outputs like preprints, how they interact with AI, which we'll get into a little bit later, as well as sort of other resources around sort of the research output space. So let me guide you a bit through this document that makes the case for why you use the CC BY license. Put simply, the CC BY license is the best option to openly license your research because it maximizes the downstream uses, the degrees of freedom that folks downstream can use your work for. And it by really minimizing the complexity of legal terms when sharing your research. You're making it as simple as possible for folks, whether that's the public, policymakers, researchers, teachers, to take your work and be able to use it in ways that enhance the world around us and what we know about the world around us, because it really only requires attribution. People can remix it, people can reuse it, people can translate it, when you don't have additional license conditions and it's only the CC BY license. Of course, the asterisk here is this makes sense in certain contexts. This makes sense when you're not working with sensitive data, when you're not working with species at risk data, when you're not working with culturally sensitive data. Here we are talking about, information that is helpful, information, whether that's publications, data, or other research outputs that are helpful for them to be as open as possible and as openly licensed as possible. So the CC BY license, it gives you the most degrees of freedom downstream. It allows the sharing and adaptations downstream. What are some examples of what people can do when you have a CC BY license? They can be translated into other languages. With other license conditions, they can't be translated. The license does not allow that. So if you want to see the maximum impact and use of your work, the CC BY license is key. It can also be adapted to educational materials and tools. So, you imagine a teacher who reads your, whether that's your preprint or a presentation that you put together, and they want to use it for teaching. The clearest way to show a teacher that you want this work to be used is to put a CC BY license, because again, it minimizes that legal complexity. It makes it as clear as possible. Even though there might be some exceptions that may allow a teacher to use it regardless, this just gives that clear message: use my work, use this knowledge I created, and share it, and have others understand this new piece of knowledge that I've created. And what better use case than Wikipedia? So Wikipedia actually has specific conditions where it requires having a CC BY or CC BY SA license on material that gets uploaded to Wikipedia. You can't have a stricter license than that. Wikipedia, second most popular website on the planet where folks go to get information. If you want your work to end up on Wikipedia, a permissive license like a CC BY license will allow that. I think I'm going to now turn it over to my colleague Kat to talk about another resource that we've created around generative AI and licenses.
Great. So as you can see, we have another resource on our Zenodo, and this one is a brief reference for how CC BY impacts generative AI training, which is basically the question of the year, what everybody wants to know. And I'll give you a few moments to open that up and download it if you'd like to see it. It's a nice, easy reference on how the licenses interact. And I'll give you a brief introduction to this section also while you're doing that. And say that this is a very rapidly changing area, as all of you, I'm sure, know. Anything I say here and any of the guidance could change in the near future, as there's legislation coming out in multiple jurisdictions, and there are court cases coming out that may shape some of this. We've tried to put the appropriate caveats and uncertainties in our guidance when we have it to make sure that you know that some of this may change and some of this is just our best understanding. But do note that it is changing. Some of the general principles of copyright, such as limitations and exceptions to copyright, like fair use and fair dealing, are still going to exist no matter what happens, but the exact contours of that may change. I'll also say that I am a US licensed lawyer. I know a lot of specifics about US law, and I know generalities about Canada, but I am not a Canadian licensed lawyer, and I know most of you here are from Canadian institutions. So I'll give you the best advice I can, and I'll try and let you know when I'm not certain. But we do have this resource so that you can get a brief reference. Here's a fairly moderately controversial opinion, but it ties into what we've been saying previously about using CC BY for research, and we believe that AI tools should be trained on research. Our mission at Creative Commons is to enable openness and sharing, to enable access to the world's information, and to create the legal tools to make that possible. And we know that a lot of people now, for better or for worse, are in fact getting their information from these AI tools. Some of these are the ChatGPTs of the world, and some of these are more specialist systems that are designed for research. But scientists are using and building generative AI tools, and people are in fact getting their information from there. They have been trained on publicly available open access research, as well as everything else that exists on the internet, some of which is accurate and some of which, as you well know, is not. But to meet the people where they are, we hope that the information that people are able to get through these tools is the best information that they can get. And if data that includes accurate scientific information is available to these resources, we hope that the information that people are actually going to get through them is going to be better. We know that a lot of people are trying to figure out how they can restrict their works from AI training. That's certainly a decision that you're going to have to make for your own institutions, considering how you would like to have impact in the world. But we do hope that open scientific information is going to be open to people who are using these tools for research. So there are several more restrictive CC license options available, as Monica mentions. We don't recommend them for open access research generally, and we don't recommend them in this case, in part because we don't believe that licensing right now is going to be the way to restrict your works from being used for AI training, even if that's a thing that you'd like to do. The most restrictive of these license options is attribution non-commercial, no derivatives. It does prohibit any commercial use without permission. It does prohibit things like translations, like adaptations, like remixes. That is available to you, and we do talk on our website about a little more of the use cases for them. We generally don't recommend that for open scientific research. The primary users of those licenses are usually going to be artists and creators that have a separate revenue stream for things like adaptations and movie rights, things like that, or who belong to a music collecting society. And there it's kind of a gateway toward openness, but especially for research that has already been supported by grant funding, where you're not depending on the economic rights for those from those licensed rights, that they be as open as possible. If we'll move on to the next slide. We think the drawbacks of using those licenses outweigh the benefits. It won't protect your research from AI training. But it will restrict other scientists, other researchers, other potential users from reusing and remixing. It will prevent it from being used on Wikipedia. It will prevent adaptation for things like textbooks or other scientific works. it won't even prevent your work from being misinterpreted. In general, people don't need copyright law to do that. People have been publishing misunderstandings and misinterpretations of all rights reserved work for as long as there has been printing. And using a restrictive license has never stopped people from doing that who want to misrepresent your work. There are ways other than copyright to deal with that. And I'll go on to the next slide and talk a little bit about why we don't think it'll restrict works from AI training. As mentioned, I am a US-based lawyer, so most of my knowledge is from the US, and most of the AI companies that are doing this work, that are using these data sets for training, are based in the US and are depending on the guidelines of US law to determine what it is that they can train on and what it is that they can reproduce. So in the US, it is likely, though not certain, that generative AIs can legally use any licensed content, whether it's all rights reserved, whether it's under any CC license, restrictive or not, to train their systems, because the current theory is that it falls under the fair use doctrine, that it is what would be called a transformative use. You're not simply reproducing the work as is, you're extracting bits and pieces from it in order to create something different, and you're not reproducing the work verbatim. This is the current argument. There are several cases going on currently that may narrow or clarify some of that. There's suits by, for example, Getty Images, the New York Times. There's some cases involving software. We don't think that those are likely to completely eliminate the consideration of fair use. There are some that may consider whether your access to the materials was lawful. There's a case involving Meta, for example, where they were found to be using torrents to train things like that. There may be some boundaries put on when it is acceptable, but in the US, I think it is generally unlikely. That said, this may change. Nobody quite knows what the outcomes are going to be, but it seems likely based on precedent of for example, the search engine cases where search engines copy works in order to reproduce them and provide accurate search results. They need to make copies of this material. That's most likely to happen. That said, in Canada, I think the status is much less clear. The fair dealing, which is the analog of fair use in Canada, is a little narrower than the fair use doctrine is in the US. It puts a greater emphasis on the commercial nature of the work and the competition with the original work. I don't know a lot of specifics about the case law, but to my understanding, I think it is more likely that some of these commercial uses of training AI would not fall under fair dealing. More of the non-commercial and research-oriented cases, particularly if you have researchers building their own systems for AI, such as some of the ones that Marianta were describing, those would be more likely. But again, it's not an easy thing to say yes, this would definitely be permitted, or no, it would definitely not be permitted. But in the US, it seems likely that using a restrictive license would not prevent your works from being used for training AI. So if AI tools can access copyrighted works, openly licensed or not, under fair use or other limitations and exceptions, then they don't need to rely on, and they're not restricted by any of the CC licenses, and your choice of license won't affect what happens to them in that regard. So, and so the drawbacks outweigh the benefits. For the reasons you wouldn't, if you wouldn't want to use a restrictive license for open science in general, you shouldn't choose one to restrict the works from AI training. It is a very restrictive, the boundaries of copyright are very restrictive. A lot of the reuse of research is going to be things that do want to adapt it. They want to make translations, they want to make textbooks. A lot of our work is consulting with, for example, educational publishers that are trying to produce course packs and other information for their students. And their questions are always about remixing and what can we do with these works that we want to use to teach our students. And you have other people who want to do things like reproduce experiments or reproduce figures, and it's extremely helpful to them to be able to reuse and reproduce that work. And even the most permissive licenses do require attribution to the source. And general academic norms still apply regardless of what license there is. Even if you're using something in the public domain, in many contexts, such as scholarship and research, we still strongly encourage people to follow those norms, such as like citing your sources and acknowledging when you've changed a work.
Thanks, Kat. So we have added your questions here on this slide from the chat and from the registration process. I'm just going to read through these and invite you all to take a moment to add any additional questions you may have in the chat. So the first question we are going to answer is, can AI models be trained on CC licensed data? Does Crown copyright apply to any of the research outputs discussed? How does CC support authors who have concerns around misuses of work published with open licenses? Which license should I choose to publish data? Can a Canadian open government license be combined with CC BY licenses? Should open licenses apply uniformly to an entire data set, or is it possible or advisable to license components differently, such as primary data, metadata, and derivative visualizations? How can we handle license compatibility when integrating data sets from multiple sources with different open licenses? And what are the main barriers to adopting open licenses in research, and how can we overcome them? Thank you to Katie Hughes, who also added, which country's copyright law applies? Is it the country where the work originates, or is it the country where it is being used? Why don't we start with that question for you, Kat, and then we'll work through the others.
Yeah, that's one where I would want to do a little more research before answering offhand. In general, if you are operating entirely within a particular jurisdiction, you're only going to be subject to your own own country's copyright laws. So that if you're using, say, for example, if you're using a work entirely within the US, you'd be bound by the restrictions of US copyright law. If you were going to use it in the original jurisdiction, like, you're not subject to that country's courts or legal system. So it would be difficult for somebody to try to enforce under that law, particularly, if you publish a work on the internet, you're making it available to all different jurisdictions. That said, it may come up in cases where the work is not available, would not be under copyright in one country, but would be under copyright in another, where that may come up in conflict. But in general, people are operating within their own country's legal system to determine what copyright laws they have to follow.
Yeah, and I just want to add quickly before we continue. I know we have several people in the virtual room here that are also knowledgeable about many of these topics. And so we want to also encourage you to share your experiences and your answers with each other via the chat if that feels appropriate. And we can have this discussion, would love to hear more about your experiences. If you feel led to share in response to one of these questions, please do so in the chat. All right, so the question that we have on the screen here, can AI models be trained on CC licensed data? I think we did address that already. And as a reminder, the recording and the slides will be available to you all on Zenodo after the fact. But yes, AI models can be trained on anything, with laws varying and potentially evolving around the legality of that training. But as it stands, as Kat mentioned prior, the answer is yes here.
For now.
For now. For now. And I believe you already also spoke to whether or not Crown copyright applies to any of the research outputs discussed. Anything to add there, Kat?
Uh, yeah, so I'll say like if Crown copyright would apply to like the work in general, and that work is being used to train AI. First of all, like some of the data produced is not copyrightable at all. Like and like so it has to be something where copyright applies to it all. Uh, but if it's being used to train an AI system and there's output produced from that, uh, some the Crown copyright may not apply to the output of that work, depending on how closely it resembles, like whether an exact reproduction of the inputs was made, or whether the output doesn't really resemble the inputs at all. In most likely, the outputs would not need to follow the license conditions unless like there has been a verbatim reproduction of the work, such as like a data set reproduced entirely, or you've got like several paragraphs that are verbatim. That's generally been the case with the AI systems. The outputs are not copyright the authors of the input material unless there is a thing happening called memorization, where it's really reproducing what's going in exactly.
Awesome. Kat, do you want to also speak to maybe Creative Commons office hours in response to the next question, which is how does CC support authors who have concerns around misuses of work published with open licenses?
Yeah. So we do have monthly, in fact, right now twice monthly office hours to support people who have questions about CC licensing and other issues. This is usually me sitting on Zoom answering people's questions as best I can, and we have that up on our consulting and training page if somebody wants to put it in the chat. In general, around misuses of work published with open licensing, our licenses do require that if you're remixing or changing a work, you do acknowledge the original work and that you've made changes, and you should note those changes. But as I mentioned earlier, like copyright is never going to stop people from misusing their work if they're really if they're really determined to do so, if they're really determined to misrepresent your work. What copyright can do is simply require that they acknowledge the original source so that people can go back and see what you really said.
Yeah. Next question is, which license should I choose to publish data? I will take this question. We also recommend the CC BY license for data. At Creative Commons, we have actually made a slight distinction internally just because of how the laws are structured to understand the differences when it comes to licensing your data, your research data versus your publications. We also have a public domain dedication, which is not a license, but it's a signal that you are giving your research to the public domain, to the world freely to use. Many times when your work is sponsored by a public entity, for example, um, it is uh, it is paid for by public dollars. The work that's been produced on the other side is also technically owned by the public, and so public domain dedication is appropriate in these cases, or in a general case where you also agree that the work should be given back to the public freely. And so when it comes to data, Creative Commons has published recommendations. We worked in partnership um, with many large global climate and Earth observation data research institutions to collaborate on these recommendations, to understand how the inner workings are, what the use cases are, where the limitations are. And as a group, we identified that either the public domain dedication or the CC BY license, again, the least restrictive license, is the most appropriate for data. This, Monica mentioned earlier, it minimizes the legal complexity. In data terms and technical terms, it maximizes interoperability. When you have a set of data that is very openly licensed, and you want to perhaps combine it with another set or a model or an analysis, um, it's much more interoperable when those sources are operating under the same license. It becomes way more complicated legally and practically if you're working to combine data sources that work within different licensing terms, and you have to figure out which pieces of the license are appropriate here and which are appropriate here. And then you may get to a point where you just don't want to use it because it's too complicated. And so this is one of the reasons why the CC BY license, our least restrictive license, is our recommended license for data and its interoperability for its application. I see a couple more in the chat, so I'm going to switch back to that. I see Cedric is asking CC BY versus CC BY SA for publishing programming code that can then be improved on by others. Yes, so Cedric, same answer. We recommend CC.
Oh, well, we're just going to stop you because I'm going to turn it over to Kat to answer that question.
Oh, great. Yes, Kat, please do.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And my answer is actually going to be none of the above. For software specifically, CC, we generally don't recommend the CC licenses for software, in part because we believe in the value of like open standards and compatibility with existing things. And before there were CC licenses for open knowledge, there was already like a thriving free software license ecosystem, and they have licenses that are very specific to sharing source code that have more meaningful and specific requirements. So we'd actually usually recommend that you use one of the established free software licenses. If you want an analog to BY-SA, usually this is when you want people to have to share their work openly if they build on yours. Something like the GPL, which is one of the Free Software Foundation's licenses, that is another copyleft license that also provides for sharing patent rights, for example, and is specific about the way you need to share the source code. If you want really wide adoption and you don't and it's not as important to you that like what gets remixed from it is shared openly, we recommend one of the more permissive software licenses. I usually recommend to people Apache v2 because that does include a patent release, which becomes important in a lot of cases. But there's also the popular MIT and BSD licenses, which are very permissive. They're similar to CC BY in spirit. Yeah, it's got Apache GPL or MIT for software, things like that. You can put a CC license on code. It's always possible to put more than one license on code, but you're able to use this code along with CC license data sets without issue. You can combine these things. You just have to make sure you're complying with the software license when you're using the code, and you're complying with the content license when you're using data sets or scholarship.
Great. Thank you so much, Kat. Thanks for jumping in too. Can a Canadian open government license be combined with CC BY licenses?
Yeah, so that one, yes, you can. And you just have to make sure that when you're using materials and you've got different licenses in play, that you're complying with all the conditions of both. So you've got one data set under the open government license and you've got one data set under the CC BY license. If you're going to reproduce something that combines those materials, you need to make sure you're complying with both, which usually just means like acknowledging the attribution and the license conditions for both. You just have to add a couple extra credit lines. You can always combine permissive licenses. You just need to make sure that you're following all the conditions required for both.
Great. And Scott in the chat is asking, what's the appropriate response to others making use of CC BY data but not providing appropriate attribution?
Yeah, so in that case, it is like any other copyrighted work where somebody has used it improperly. You are entitled to enforce your rights in court. But for CC licenses, we generally recommend, in order to adhere to the spirit of the licenses, a lot of this happens by mistake, that you do try to enforce it through like non-legal means first, by like just asking them to correct it, and we do have a page that Eleanor has just linked on license enforcement, where we've talked a lot about we really want people to resolve their issues without taking it to court first, but here's some guidelines on like how to ask and like why we want people to resolve. But a CC license is just as valid as far as we know in multiple jurisdictions as any other copyright license. You are legally entitled to enforce those rights, including if somebody has mistaken the attribution or not provided it.
Great. And then as a follow-up, what happens if the entity that licenses data with CC BY no longer exists?
Right. These works are still in copyright unless they've been explicitly like given to the public domain. But what usually happens is somebody has usually inherited those rights. If it's a nonprofit, maybe their assets have gone to some other entity, or like if it's a person who has died, somebody has often inherited those rights. They may or may not know that. So the answer is it's still in copyright to somebody until the copyright term expires, and the term expiration is either based on the life of the person who created it or a certain number of years if it's a crown copyright or a corporate produced work. But it will still be in copyright, but you may have difficulty locating the rights holder. So the CC license will still be valid. You are still entitled to use it for as long as the copyright term lasts. If you need an additional permission, you may have difficulty because legally you will need to contact the rights holder. And if you can't locate them, what to do with that work kind of depends on your individual risk assessment, like whether you think the rights holder will object to your work, but it is still in copyright.
Great. I know we are nearing the end of the hour. And I wanted to just remind folks that we have office hours regularly with our lovely Kat and our legal team. And we are here to help. So I know that there are more questions here on the slide. As I mentioned earlier, these are some of the questions that were coming in from the registration process. We really wanted to be proactive about understanding what questions you had and how to best answer them with our time together. But we look forward to continuing these conversations and understanding together. So, would like to invite you all to our office hours, but thank you, Monica, for putting in the chat. They're an hour each of the first Monday and third Friday of each month. And they're open times to have conversations with our legal team to figure out some of these nuanced questions as you're navigating your own research, your own development of tools, your own management of data, et cetera. And so we hope that you can continue those conversations with us there. And we want to give a special thank you to you all for being here, and a huge thank you to OGSL for inviting us to have this conversation together. We're very excited about the work that you're doing, and just grateful for the opportunity to continue to support you as you do. And we're here to help, at any time. This is very exciting for us. So if you find yourself in a position where you're getting a headache, just call us because we love this stuff. And I'm going to just pass it back to you, Marianta, just as we conclude, in case there's anything you want to add.
Yes, thank you. That was a great webinar, so thank you very much for that. What I could say for SLGO is that this year we are celebrating our 20th anniversary. So we invite you all to check out our website and social media over the coming weeks and months, as we will be highlighting some of our milestones and sharing where we are headed next, and also for the next webinar where we will keep on working on open data and that wonderful world of data and openness.
Great. And a huge thank you to Kat and Monica from the Creative Commons team for all your expertise. Really appreciate you, as always. And thank you everyone for joining us. We'll share this information back out with you all so you can share it with your colleagues. Hope you have a great rest of your morning, afternoon, or evening. And we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Taylor. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.